Hello everybody and welcome back. And in last week's video, we had finally finished the Jude book 6th verse, where we looked in the Jude book 6th verse about the fallen angels and the mistakes they committed, as it was said in the verse, as something that should not be committed. So now we're going to go look at the 7th verse as the character of what we should not show once again. And in the 7th verse, it talks about in a similar way towards the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and Sodom and Gomorrah in general. So now let's read this verse and understand what is really this verse talking about. So let's read it. Jude 7th chapter, it says, "Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication, and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire." So we read the verse right now. So from the Jude book, we studied so far, as an example so far, in the Jude book, each and individual word we've looked about Cain, Balaam and Korah, Israelites and the fallen angels. Now we're going to look about the two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, recorded in the Genesis book. But before we go into the Genesis book and really understand about what's going on about the cities and the people who live in these cities, we're going to read about what Apostle Peter explains in the New Testament of 2 Peter 2nd chapter 6th verse. So we're going to really understand what first as a basic overlay of what it's really talking about, what Sodom and Gomorrah is. So let's read 2 Peter 2nd chapter 6th verse. "And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an ensample unto those after should live ungodly." So we can see here from these verses, it's explaining that, well, this verse here is really talking about how the city is condemned and is seen as an unholy or ungodly place. But the meaning of ungodly is of those who contradict God, of course. And also Apostle Paul himself has quoted this in the Isaiah prophet's words, recorded in Isaiah 1st 9th chapter. In Romans, he said the same thing about the prediction of Isaiah. What he said about the ungodly characteristics means that they have someone who has contradicted God. As Apostle Paul predicts the words and records it in his verse of Romans 9th chapter 29th verse, which is said by Isaiah in Isaiah chapter, the prophet who recorded in Isaiah 1st chapter 9th verse. So what we're going to read now, that we're going to read is Romans 9th chapter 29th verse. So let us read that right now. So Romans 9th chapter 29th verse. Let us see what Paul has said about this. So in Romans 9th chapter, 9th chapter 29th verse, it says, "And as Asius said before, except the Lord of Sabaoth had left us a seed, we had been seen as Sodom and been made like unto Gomorrah." So we can see here Isaiah insists the point of repentance here, like Apostle Paul has explained that Isaiah's point in his verse, and the point of repentance that explains only by his grace. As Israelites are not destroyed like the two cities, though they did sinful life, compared with Sodom and Gomorrah's lifestyle, how their lifestyle was completely hated by God, as recorded in the Bible seriously, not like the people of Israel were sinful, as we saw, and compared to, as we know, that in Israel, the people there, their lifestyles and how they were was sinful towards God, and that is why the punishment was bestowed upon them. But when we see the Sodom and Gomorrah, how it is explained as one of the most hated incidents of God recorded in the Bible. It's one of the things that God hates to the peak of his core, we could say, and as it's explained in the Bible very seriously. So we will continue more about understanding about the Sodom and Gomorrah next week. So that's all for today. And let us go to understand next week more about Sodom and Gomorrah. But before we go, let us just look through what we understood. So first of all, we understood in 2 Peter 2nd chapter 6th verse, we understood about Sodom and Gomorrah and was condemned to turn into ashes, and their extinction because of the ungodly and unrighteous acts on how they acted in their lives, which was sensual and said to be wicked by their actions. And we can see I was recorded in 2 Peter 2nd chapter 6th verse. We also see before that about how in the Jude book we looked about Cain, Balaam, Jude, Israelites, and the fallen angels. We're now going to look about the Sodom, Gomorrah cities, which are recorded, of course. We've of course recorded in the Jude book. We then looked about how the ungodly measurement was talked about not only in the 2 Peter 2nd chapter 6th verse, but also quoted about the ungodly people, means people who contradict God to the point where it is unacceptable, which Isaiah the prophet recorded in Isaiah 1st 9th verse, and wrote in Apostle Paul quoted what he had said in Romans 9th 29th verse. And we read the Romans 9th 29th verse, where we saw about how here we can see that here Isaiah insists the point of repentance and explains only by his grace that Israelites are not destroyed like the two cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their sinful life. But when we compare it to Sodom and Gomorrah, they're completely destroyed for the amount of hate that God had towards them, because God completely hated their lifestyle and how they acted in the Bible very seriously. So we'll learn more about Sodom and Gomorrah in next week's video. So see you then. Bye.